Welcome to another episode of Savor Newark, the podcast. I'm Carlos Ferreira, and this is a great opportunity for us to discuss everything that goes into making Newark the capital of authentic food. As you know, our background is Portuguese, but increasingly growing is the Ecuadorian community, and with that, the flavors are also shaping the way we eat in the Ironbound. With me, have Alex Pardo, a local entrepreneur that is increasingly growing the global footprint. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me here, Carlos.
In case you don't know, Alex and his family, they own Sabor Latino, amongst other business endeavors that we'll talk about shortly. You came at the age of 6, right, from Ecuador, right?
Yes, Carlos. So many years ago, but 6 was the magic number that brought me to this amazing country.
hmm And how was your upbringing? I know that your godmother is Portuguese,
Right.
her partner is
hmm
French gentleman,
hmm
so you've always had a pretty global upbringing. How has that shaped the entrepreneur that you are today?
So, first of all, I'd always love to give a shout out to my godparents because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have learned the beautiful language of Portuguese. And I have to say, right, they shaped a lot of my upbringing because not only did they show me and broaden my culture, but they really showed me what's possible, right? What one flavor could mean when, one sabor goes to a different border and what that can do. So, yes, tremendously that has shaped and it has influenced in what we do today at Sabor Latino.
hmm So your father was also, your parents are a great example of
Absolutely.
tenacity and resilience.
hmm
Your father also worked in construction at the Iberia, and
hmm
now he's a
hmm
great entrepreneur. How has that inspired you and your brothers?
I will say, so my father is definitely the pillar of and of course, where we stand, right? So, a brief story because I think it would help, with context, right, of how we got here. So my father came here in the early 90s, and at the time he came with two of my uncles. Of course, at that time, Spanish food was very difficult to find. So he knew he needed to get experience, but he's actually by trade a professor in Ecuador. So he graduated as a professor, but he knew he needed a better life, right? And of course, it didn't help having, a baby to fill at the time, right? So when he came here, again, he gained experience. He worked with Iberia, the Loreto family. And at some point, he realized he needed to make a change because where else could he find, food from his country, Latin food? And at the time in Ferry Street, there was absolutely no Ecuadorian restaurants or Latin food at all. So in 1999, right, during that time, he started to already invest in construction companies, but his heart was always in food because, right, food does something special. It unites us, it lets us share a meal, it lets us talk about the day. It's something warm. So, with all the experience that at that time he gained at Iberia, but also through his other endeavors, in 1999 he started the first Sabor Latino in Ferry Street, a street that for many years did not cater to Latinos or Ecuadorians, and he made that impact there.
And now, from that first Sabor Latino, you have other
Mhm.
restaurants and establishments.
Yeah, so to add to that, right, I think that experience really shaped and was the catalyst for us because from there, the business grew into nightclubs, into bars, into other restaurants in other cities, Elizabeth at the time as well, diners. So it definitely expanded. But one thing that I've learned is that no matter the footprint, we always have to focus on the basics. And what are the basics? Our neighbors, our communities, who we're serving, how could we make that flavor feel like home? So even though the footprint expanded, the actual base of our customers has always remained the same.
hmm One of the things that we feel that
Mhm,
sets Newark apart,
mhm,
it's the concentration of authentic restaurants. As Portuguese, I feel that in most cases, we at a similar level, at the level as if we were in Portugal, actually.
mhm,
Granted, there are some products fish. If we if we eat fish by the ocean in
Right.
Portugal or by the beach, the whole setup is going to taste differently.
Hmm.
But in general, these chefs and these restaurants are are great ambassadors of the
Hmm.
Portuguese flavors.
Hmm.
I got a chance to try your restaurant once.
Excellent.
I just don't know the Ecuadorian cuisine
Okay.
as well,
Hmm.
but I know that it was very tasty for sure. I mean, you guys have, as
Hmm.
Ecuador, you have the mountains, you have the beach, so
Hmm.
obviously that diverse landscape and ecosystem also translates into diverse dishes. A
Hmm.
lot of seafood, but also great meats. And um, what goes into keeping those flavors
Hmm.
really alive in the States, a home away from home?
I love that question, Carlos, for many reasons, right? And I could also say myself as an example of why that really speaks to my heart. So when I was 6 years old and I came to this country, the hardest thing was discerning the flavors of home. While I was eating the same, I would say, potatoes or cookies or milk that was made here, the flavors, I could discern them because that wasn't what I ate back in Ecuador, right? So, one of the reasons that I think that's very important is because whenever we cook at the restaurants and whenever we focus, the first thing is this family, right? How could we get family, loved ones, friends to share a plate? Because that's the most important thing. And even, let's say, for whatever reasons, maybe, in the household, each household is unique, then we'll think about, okay, if perhaps this is a plate that you could share, how could we make a plate that's just good enough, but even better to give you the nostalgia to take you back home? So one of the things that we do, and as a point in the Ecuadorian market, I'll give you an example, right, of if you're Ecuadorian, you'll probably know, and it's called encebollado. It's a fish soup that's tradition to the coast. It's made of albacore. It's delicious, right? But I'm going to give you an example of how it's different in two regions of Ecuador, but how that helped us actually come up with an idea to bring those flavors of home back here. So if you go eat encebollado, it usually brings tostado, which is corn that's fried and it goes on top of this fish soup, right? But if you go to the coast, Guayaquil, anywhere that's right near the Pacific, they eat it with bread. So they dunk the bread in the soup and they eat it.
Mhm.
So when we started to realize that our customers were like, hey, can you add bread to this? That's when we realized we need to start a bread company to supply this. But it really wasn't our so much idea. This was years in the making when our customers started telling us what they need, right, to make them feel like home. And we just happened to create the model around it to supply them with that.
But what's interesting
Hmm.
in that resilience of yours is maybe in some cases some customers would tell you, you need to put some bread. And you're
Hmm.
like, sure, let's buy some bread
Hmm.
and add some bread. In your case, it's like, no, what we need is a bread company.
That's very true. That's
That's
very
pretty
true.
brave.
Right.
Where
Right.
do you think that tenacity and courage comes from?
So there's something that I believe, right? Nobody knows their destiny. They only know the shots they're willing to take and what those shots will prove to them, right? So we only knew that if we kept buying breads from distributors, we wouldn't necessarily know how we could do this long term for our customers. I mean, they're emigrating from so many countries. So we needed to control the flavor. I mean, Sabor Latino really means the Latin flavor, right? So what's the best way if we can control and manage the supply chain from the way we cook it to the way it actually tastes and to the point where it actually families sit down and share this, right? So the tenacity, I really believe in our retrospect, comes from believing in what in our core takes us back to home. So yes, could we buy it? That's one thing. But doesn't it taste better when we can make it by Latinos to everyone else? So that is our tenacity there.
Very good. And now it's tenacity that now you have a full-on operation. Tell
Yeah.
me a little bit of Sabor and how you are you guys expanding in the market?
Thank you. So, Carlos, it's been a definitely, I would say, huge change. But apart from our customers, many years when Sabor Latino started in 1999, and they would say like, hey, put some bread with encebollado, or why don't you add cookies to this and things like that, right? What happened truly was that the bread business came about in 2020. And as we all know, right here specifically in Newark and to many, I would say public officials that helped small businesses and restaurants thrive, the restaurant or say hospitality business, really went through, I would say, a deep change during that period. But it was that period that actually made us evolve because we realized how can we provide the same comfort of food, but to supermarkets where our shoppers are going to get their food, right? So it was in 2020 when Sabor Latino started producing at a mass scale, in this case as a wholesale bakery, Latin breads, Latin foods, and etc. But the goal remained the same. So now we're thinking, okay, we're going to make that bread, but now we're going to bake it ourselves. We're going to make it with those flavors of home. But at the same time, that also, in a way, evolved our evolution. So Sabor Latino, through this change of consumer goods, delivering through private label, through supermarkets, positioned us now to Sabor Foods.
So the pandemic definitely didn't weaken your operation. If anything, it even made it stronger.
Absolutely. I mean, and I give that to our team. So, our team that's listening and everyone who supported, it's a lot of the sacrifices that we all made, but we wouldn't be here without those team effort. And of course, I would say mission, right? And the mission, what is that? To, again, bring those flavors of home back here. So, they are very important to us.
You keep the same formula
Hmm.
as a family operation.
Hmm.
Nevertheless, in terms of Sabor, you're pretty much running the operations.
Right.
We're very directly involved with
Hmm.
the operations. Tell me a little bit more about the brand itself,
Okay.
the type of products, some ideas for the future. What type of flavors can
Okay.
we expect from Sabor?
I mean, you know what, Carlos? Our goal really is to feed anyone who's hungry, but feed them in a way where it takes them back to those moments where they were thinking, this is the meal that I had when I was with my mother, father, uncle, friend, right? So, part of Sabor Foods being a consumer goods brand is one, having those flavors that are innovative but different. But here is really where we're going to make the change. We're not trying to be another bread brand, right? Or consider ourselves as a Latino bread. We're really a category innovator. But what does that mean? So when you go to a supermarket, right, and you look at that bread aisle, specifically the sliced bread aisle, you see the same brands with a lot of the times they have ingredients that are not necessarily clean. They're, I will admit, unhealthy. So that right there sparked our evolution because we make all of our breads with clean ingredients. They're organic. But more importantly, on why we're a disruptor to the bread category is because we're literally making sliced bread with Latino influence. So next time you go to, again, your supermarket and find that and you see Sabor Foods, our brand there, it should signify tradition, organic, clean, but also different, bringing you those flavors of home.
And what makes
Mhm.
the bread with a little bit of a Latino swag?
Yeah. You know what? That's a great question. Family. So, in the bread itself, right, one of the things that we put in the packaging is an honor to our family, which, who are we? We're immigrants,
Hmm.
right? And one of the things that you mentioned today that it really spoke to me is this tenacity. And the tenacity of our brand is really there was a gentleman, my father, who immigrated, left his profession of being a professor, right? Left that behind to start a new business, right? To grow that business. But it was because of the support of the immigrant community that also helped us grow. But the best part about tenacity is that it never stops. You fuel it. So that tenacity built up my fire to keep on going, but not just so much as a hospitality restaurant business, but in a way where we could scale through the East Coast, nationwide, wherever there's someone that's hungry, that wants to eat good bread, we want to be there.
So, what would you like to see happening with your
Okay.
brand? Would you like to expand
Hmm.
internationally? What would be the ideal scenario, or what can we expect from you?
So some of the breads that, and that's a great question because I wanted to also highlight some of the products. So we're making things like swirl bread, white bread that's traditional but clean. And what I mean by that is just focusing on the core, the taste. Because if the taste is good, that's the most important, right? But going back to distribution, right now my goal is really to be that bread innovator in the capacity of disrupting traditional bread aisles in supermarkets. So right now, I would invite everyone to go to your local, supermarket and just look at that bread aisle. And you're going to see it's the same bread that's packaged differently, but at the end, it's still the same thing. Our mission, my long term plan, is to make ourselves known by the flavors we bring from home. And let's say if we do make a different variation of a white bread, we're going to infuse it with real natural flavors like vanilla, perhaps chocolate, cinnamon, but that are imported from Latin American countries because we want to give back to the families, the immigrants that also build up a lot of what we do today.
So there's a sense of social responsibility, empowerment,
Hmm.
Latino empowerment.
Absolutely. That's really what drives us. We're a family business, right? But at the end of the day, if it weren't for our friends that helped us build the business, meaning our distributors, our, vegetable person in those early days, right? These are, I would say, representatives from other Latin countries that helped us build. So for us, making Sabor Foods happen is really a way to honor all these countries with the goal of social, movement in that mobility aspect of things.
Hmm. Throughout the years, how do you feel that the Hispanic communities have supported? Were they very supportive?
Oh, absolutely. I think the Hispanic community, and I say this with grace, has been very supportive because we know their pains, right? We know, as from the stories that I've been told as a child, right? The stories that my uncles had to take, my father had to take, godparents to move here, right? So the support has been so important because not only do we understand their challenges, but at the same time, that's what keeps us united because we give back the same way. So if, for instance, we have somebody that came from a new country, let's say a new Latin American country that's not so much of numbers here, let's say like a Honduran or a Guatemalan, countries that are not represented so much in the Ironbound, we're going to give them a chance because we want to say, hey, the community gave us a chance here, so let's bring it back. Let's give it back
Hmm.
because that's the way that they're going to grow, we're going to grow, but together we all grow.
Hmm. You come from a background of banking,
I do.
and everybody can tell. I mean, you're a
Hmm.
pretty successful family, but your parents always
Hmm.
made you work. So you even work construction,
I did.
and to their
I was a
surprise,
mason, right, right.
to their surprise, you actually liked it.
That's right. That's right.
And we go back to those
Yeah.
years that truly shaped the man and entrepreneur that you are today.
Thank you. So I'll bring you back to 1999. So my friends here in the Ironbound, because I grew up here in the Ironbound, very proud of that. I take that pride everywhere. That I went to Lafayette Street School. So to all my Falcons out there, they know who they are.
Go
Go
Falcons.
Falcons, right? Lafayette Street really shaped me, and I'll advise why. So when the family business started in 1999, my family wanted me to stay out of trouble. So they said, you're going to wash cups on your weekends, right? So while my friends were, playing basketball or doing these activities, I was washing cups, right? And it molded me because at that point, well, granted, I didn't enjoy it. I'd rather prefer, doing normal, traditional kid things. Down the line, I was able to see why that shaped me. And a lot of it was because I got to see what their sacrifice was. And early on, I realized that you got to build great things with hard work. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be some days that are going to be challenging, but the real instinct is in never giving up, right? And that's why I said earlier, nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, but you'll know based on the shots that you take because they're going to compound and they're eventually going to speak for themselves, like planting a seed. So that shaped me because I learned the value of work early, and because I learned that, now everything that I do, I just give it my best.
Mhm. Um, your parents, your father
Hmm.
was a professor, and your mom was also an educated
Hmm.
woman. Shout out to Nancy Pardo.
Hmm.
Um, they wanted you to also keep on studying, right? And
Hmm.
to pursue those studies, but also keep you grounded,
Hmm.
right? And you're talking about the washing the dishes, which is obviously a very important part in the restaurant business,
Right,
right?
right.
But you're also apparently in the construction business.
That's
You
right.
apparently you also thrived.
Right, right. Yes. Oof, let me tell you, those construction days. So yes, my family did have a masonry company. They still have it. So that's part of the, I would say, construction arm of the family company. But yeah, early on, they were like, hey, you know what? Maybe it's a good idea if you know how to mix brick. So if you ever have a brick that's missing, you could, do it yourself. But early on, and I wanted to bring a light to that, right? The construction business it originally started, that was one of the first businesses that the family started. But after a while, right, the passion and the love of food and the love of sharing a meal, I would say was greater. So my family, in this case, my father and mother, put more emphasis on it. But we always knew that real estate would also grow. And there's two things that I believe people need in life outside of love. Love is the most important by far. But second to that is shelter, home, or a space that could protect you from, the seasons, but food. So, in that case, in retrospect, right, they wanted me to learn how to cook, but
And out
also
of
how to build. So in a way, right, I appreciate that because if it wasn't for those early on experiences, now I could say I'm a decent cook and I could build some things.
I really admire that. And there was a time that when was taking my master's,
Hmm.
I tried
Okay.
construction myself.
Hmm.
Um, some person I know, and they needed an assistant. But I mean, I was an assistant with zero experience, but I also
Hmm.
wanted to
Hmm.
at least try to develop that side that it's
Hmm.
more manual. And I have some friends that actually do it, and they're pretty good, and other musician friends. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm building my home studio, and it's gonna
Yeah.
be great. It's gonna be great. And I'm like, what do you mean your home studio?
Mm.
You know, because that to me is just so far fetched. I truly admire people that also have that ability with their hands too, very
Hmm.
manual work. So very hands-on experience.
Hmm.
And then from there,
Hmm.
banking. How
Hmm.
did that come into your life? And
Hmm.
how is that helping also? I'm pretty sure that that helps the business side also, that background in banking as well, right?
Right. So, there's one thing and by the way, I really applaud you, Carlos, first of all, for doing what you're doing with your program because the Ironbound truly has gems. And what I mean by gems, not just the businesses that make it, but the leaders in the communities, right? And one of the things that as I mentioned earlier, I'm very proud to be of the Ironbound is because when I started here, right, our family endeavors, and I wanted to say one more thing, we even got involved in the printing business. So at some point, we actually owned Jefferson Printing, which is on Jefferson Street many years ago. We acquired that, but through that point, I had to learn different verticals of the business, right? And there was a period in my life where, I've realized, okay, I know restaurants, I know the culinary world, I know the construction world. I could, I navigate myself through the printing side of the field, but I really want to understand what finances all of this, right? How does that work, right? And early on at the age of 19, I decided to get into banking, so I started through the ropes, right? After I graduated, eventually I moved on into different positions in the banking world. So I would call it through my banking graduation, meaning Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Valley Bank. But that richness taught me many things. One, how to expand my network, but more importantly, beyond the networks, is really how to work with capital responsibly, right? Because what's the point if you have all this capital, but you can't manage it well? And what if you could use the capital to really make a lasting legacy and impact with it that not just improves the way you operate, but improves how people could live their lives too? So that really changed my life in that space.
Hmm. How important do you think it is
Hmm.
to teach the youth
Hmm.
finances. I don't think it's taught enough in school.
I agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think finance education is real education because, I always say, right, what's the point of having, as an example, right, $100 if you're spending $300? But what if you knew how to unlock the power of those $100 to make you $500, right? But I do believe also it should be something that should be taught in homes. It should be something that should perhaps be taught early in grammar school, right? Because while students come to class to learn, we don't know the education they're being taught in their homes. But what if, right, there could be some sort of social impact that could teach students the basics, right, the fundamentals. What is investing early on? So by the time they get to that point, that seed is already growing. So I agree. I think it would be tremendous.
Hmm. For people who don't know, what do you
Mhm.
think that makes Ecuadorian food so flavorful?
You're putting me on the spot there, Carlos, because I love Ecuadorian food, right? What I think what makes the flavor is this. I really invite everyone to see first, right, what Ecuador is all about. And what I mean by that, Ecuador is one of the few countries that has both the islands, the Galapagos, has the rainforest, has the mountains, and has the coasts. So there's different seasons for every lake, right? But at the same time, all those seasons contribute to the different flavors that people eat, different sabores, right?
Hmm.
So one of the things that I would say would contribute to the flavors, and I know this has no quantitative number or secret, but is really the household. As an example, you could eat the same soup in the mountain, but if you eat that same soup in the coast, it's night and day,
Hmm.
right? And usually when you talk to the families who were making it, it's a passed down recipe. Some people add peanut butter to some of their plates, some just straight lime and lemon, right? But I would say it's the family.
Hmm. And the fact that there's also um, there's a vast array of flavors, and you have seafood,
Right,
fish.
right.
You're also big in meats too, So.
So I'll tell you something fun about Sabor Latino. So Sabor Latino, the reason that, we started as a small business on Ferry Street that has then expanded was because we started to get customers that weren't from where we were from, our family was from. They were from the coast. And they were saying, hey, can you add more seafood items, right? At that point, the business it had to grow itself, right? It had to evolve. Where when we opened the second Sabor, we focused more on those spaces, those parts of Ecuador, where now you could get that real flavor, from the beach. So you don't have to be at the beach; you could be here, getting that same meal. But in addition to that, right, we really focus on getting our team that knows those flavors so they can deliver. So our head chefs, they're actually from different parts of Ecuador. So when the flavors come, we really make it our goal to make it as close as possible to that.
And what do you feel that the reaction of the Ecuadorian community
Hmm.
here is? Do they appreciate it?
Hmm.
Do you have some of them saying like, it's really not the same,
Hmm.
or they criticize, or they're very appreciative that you're bringing a
Hmm.
piece of Ecuador here?
So I think one of the reasons why the family's now onto the restaurant business is up to 26 years is because we listen to our customers, but we also know when there's times where we could make the changes and not, right? But I also think flavor is very individualized,
Mhm.
right? We can both have the same meal, but you can have your own taste and mine, right? But I always say let's keep the foundations as close as possible so we could at least deliver that, I would say, flavor that makes it unique.
Mhm.
So I would say in Latin cultures, right, the first thing that you put in that pan is that adobo, right, which is
Mhm.
that household flavor that many cultures make it their own. So one of the things, as an example, what makes our flavor unique, we took all these pieces of advice, we sat down with our chefs, and we were like, we're going to try each one until one, it's healthy, it's clean, but most importantly, again, it gives you that flavor of home. So that is really the core. We listened, we deliver, and I would say, right, you can't deliver all the time, but you could do the best, right, at keeping a space of equality, right? And that I truly believe has been our core with that.
And you've definitely been doing a great job throughout the years, and your success is obviously the living proof. Growing up in Newark, as you said, um, I feel we're living in a technology era, right? We're producing our podcast here. We can communicate with the world easier than ever. We also live in an era of artificial intelligence, and with the good and bad that can also bring. A lot of people talk about, in some cases, fake news as well. But I really think that the Ironbound, throughout this, regardless of these waves and fads and technological advancements, the Ironbound stays unique to its formula of authenticity that is unbreakable.
Very true.
In some cases, there are even restaurants that are really even hard to pronounce for the non-Portuguese speakers or non-Spanish. I guess you guys are a little bit more careful. Sabor Latino, it's not like Seabras Marisqueira,
Got it.
Preguinho, Escritório,
Right.
which is interesting because they don't really care. It's not about making it easy. It's about making it real.
I love that. You've hit it right on the nail. And that's what I love about the Ironbound, right? That you have all these, unique restaurants, right, that make the culture here alive. As an example, a couple weeks ago, we went to eat at Fogo no Chão, right, as an example. And my father, he is big on culinary, on food, he was like, hold on, I could have had a meal that's a million times better at the Ironbound because, I know the flavors, right? So I think the Ironbound does a great job in keeping its authenticity because that's really what separates us, but also keeping innovation in food, right? You can go in one street and you can find 5 different restaurants from 5 different cultures without going to the city. To me, there's just no comparison to that.
And sometimes you go to the city, and obviously New York City is a great city.
Yeah.
We love it. But in some cases, it gives you a different experience. Sometimes more fusion, hip, trendy. These countries meet the village, kind of, or Williamsburg, and it's Brooklyn hip and all. But in Newark and in the Ironbound, it is what it is. Almost homemade. It's almost your Ecuadorian granny cooking, or your Portuguese mother cooking. So it's really, I think that the beauty of it has to do with how authentic and how family driven it truly is. And more than the adobos and what we taste is family traditions.
Absolutely.
And it's the love for the nostalgia, the love for these countries that we leave behind. And I feel that ultimately immigrants are the true ambassadors of these flavors, right? And they hold on to it in a very sincere, very coherent and passionate way. And I think that we taste all of that in the Ironbound.
100% agree. Nostalgia really, and that's why if there's one message about everything that I said about Sabor Latino and Sabor Foods is really the power of nostalgia. What we do isn't based so much on, hey, let's do this because we think it's right. It's let's do this because this is what we grew up on. And how could we deliver that today? So yes, you're absolutely right.
Throughout this whole amazing, inspirational journey of yours, what has been the best part of it all?
The best part, and I always go back to COVID, is really that time. Because while there were many negatives that happened, it taught me the power of never giving up. I saw a lot of friends, a lot of colleagues, a lot of business leaders in the community that suffered because of the lack of clientele, their employees getting sick. And it was literally flipping a coin. Do we continue or do we shut down? And I would say that propelled me in never giving up because that's the curiosity. What happens if you don't give up?
Mhm.
That's, I would say, part of the influence and the curiosity of the greater things of life is what happens when you don't give up. And I think when we don't give up, we really find to define who we are as a person. So that period makes a lot of who I am today.
Very good. Today you're also very inspired. But
Thank you,
it's a
Carlos.
truly an inspiring story, yours and your family. In terms of the group right now, so you have Sabor
Mhm.
Latino,
Yep.
you have the diner
Yes.
in Newark. Um, what other endeavors could we include?
So, besides the hospitality aspect of it, which is the restaurant, the diners, is we really now are moving into consumer goods. So, Sabor Foods evolved into that space because we're getting all of the organic meals that we make in the restaurant that we've made for many years. But the difference is that now we're packaging them and we're distributing them to supermarkets, to retailers.
Where can people find your Sabor products?
And you know what? This is going to be our year, and I'll say why. So, for the last 5 years, we've been private labeling. So, for those that don't know what private labeling means, is that, we get our bread and we, pretty much sell it to supermarkets and places, but without our brand, right? However, this year, we've are now moving into the brand space. So meaning that you could find now our, breads in some of the local community supermarkets here, ethnic and non-ethnic supermarkets. So one of the things that I would advise is follow us at Sabor Foods Co. on Instagram or Sabor Foods on LinkedIn to find out about our, list because we're going to make that live where you could see and find our bread products through the state.
Hmm. The Ironbound has had a great tradition of great
Mm-hmm.
food for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's still, in some cases, a rhetoric,
Mm-hmm.
a negative rhetoric that around Newark
Okay.
that tends to work against these wonderful family stories
Mm-hmm.
and family-owned businesses. To the people that are still somewhat skeptical or they don't know as well what to expect from the Ironbound or only come to Newark to go to the Prudential Center but then leave,
Mm-hmm.
what would you tell them?
They're missing out. They're missing out because they don't know the gems that are being built right now in the Ironbound in Newark that are going to be, they're going to be here for a lifetime because they're built by grit. They're built by real people, by real sacrifices. Not to say that elsewhere they're not, but you can knock down the door and you can find a founder. You can find that immigrant who, again, changed their community for how long, how many years. But I also do believe that, to your point, the Ironbound is going through a big economic and social change as well, right? There's a lot of new, visitors that we have that are now living here from New York City, Jersey City, and other areas. But I also feel that they're coming here because they know the offerings that we have, which is those family businesses, those local shops that will give you, that nostalgia, but at an affordable cost as
Mhm.
well, which I think is very much important. So when I say missing out is, do people want, do they want to eat good, but at the same time save some dollars? You're missing out because then you clearly haven't come to the Ironbound. Do you want that premium selection of fine meats and cuts without going to the city? That's another reason why you should come to the Ironbound. And most importantly, if you just want to tour something, if do you want to be in Portugal, in Brazil, in Ecuador without taking a flight, then you're missing out because you can have that here in the Ironbound as well.
Very good. Savor Newark is an annual symposium,
Okay.
and it's a way for us to bring together
Mhm.
some key stakeholders and truly discuss all of the, the points and the attributes and all of the what goes on
Mhm.
um, as far as the food scene of the Ironbound is concerned. We're very passionate about these food stories, family stories,
Mhm.
the grit. This is not food chains
Mhm.
like Folk Show, with all the respect to Folk Show. but these are actually families that
Mm-hmm.
fighting for their American dream
Mm-hmm.
while keeping their roots alive. And that's something that you don't find anywhere with so many good restaurants
Mm-hmm.
concentrated in the same neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of the mission and our goal with Savor Newark, the symposium. There's also a component of impacting the youth, and we partnered with vocational school and all, but our goal is always to highlight and elevate the efforts of families like yours. I find it particularly inspirational to share this moment with you, and we want this to be a platform that allows for these conversations to keep on going.
Mm-hmm.
To be consistent.
So to that point, and thank you so much for that. Well, it's really my honor to be here to share this message, but I also want to, show you how we really are also advancing your message, but in a community. So one of the things that we do, we fund scholarships, we fund, meals, free meals whenever it's available. When we distribute to churches, right? Most of the time we do it out of good grace because we understand those families, right? So just like they're helping us through these years, with innovating new ideas and helping us grow, we wouldn't be here without them. And that's why, I'm a very family focused man because I learned through that, right? And I hope that we can continue as a community with other leaders, to do these things, right?
Mhm.
Where we're not just taking care of one community, but really, and that's what I love about the food space, we're helping anyone who's hungry.
Mhm. Looking back, what would you like your family legacy to be?
I'm very, I would say, as I mentioned before, focused on family. So if there's one thing that I would like to be a representation of who we are, is really of a family that doesn't give up despite the challenges of life. There's always a way, right? So if many years from now, right, someone's listening to this, or my family in the future, right, I want them to know that there's always a way, right? Nothing is ever the end. There's always a way. You just have to figure it out. And if you keep trying, you're going to get to that point. So to me, to all the immigrants, to all the people that are here, the second generations, first generations, sixth generations, I want that message to be loud, right?
Mhm.
Never give up. There's always a way. And if you're willing to take those shots, right, that plan is going to grow and it's going to do a lot of positive change if you're willing to stick that route.
When you think of your ideal client,
Okay.
and we were talking about your Hispanic um,
Mm-hmm.
market, which is an increasing population here. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about 25%.
Right.
It represents a lot in terms of
Mm-hmm.
market share. Uh, when you think of your brand, you think mostly in your Hispanic communities,
Mm-hmm.
or it's something that you want also you feel this responsibility of, yes, cater to the Hispanic, but also educate the non-Hispanics and take the Hispanic flavors for even further.
That's a powerful question, and it's something that I think about more than I should every day. So I'll shed some light to it. So there's many reasons why the brand changed from Sabor Latino to Sabor Foods, and a lot of it was because sabor means flavor in many cultures. So unlike, I would say, specifying it to a certain ethnic market, we want to speak to everyone because we know everyone's hungry at some point, right? So one of my goals is, yes, to educate, right? Again, and tell a story of what flavors are and what that means. But at the same time, right, share it to communities that perhaps aren't as familiar with Latin food, right? So to me, sabor, when people see that on the shelves, it shouldn't represent, an ethnic space or food, or a product that speaks to one culture, but it should be an open invitation to try something that has flavor as the word, but more importantly, that takes you home to a space where now, if you're looking to, book that flight, hopefully, right, is that you could find it in the supermarket through us, and you can get that flavor that you would have had back there.
Alex, thank you so much. I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much,
Thank you for
Carlos.
this flavorful conversation.
Right.
It was
Thank
a
you.
conversation with our dear friend,
Mhm.
Alex Pardo. Follow them. Also follow Savor Newark at +PR and support the cause and support local businesses. I'll see you next time.